Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some sauteed chicken sandwiches with onions, tomatoes, some avocado. We're going to make up some sweet potato fries and bake up a batch of sourdough blueberry muffins. So let's start by getting our sweet potatoes ready, and we can pop these in the oven to kind of start cooking up. So I'm just going to cut the tops off of them, and then we're going to do a kind of a simple little peel on them and get this outer bit on it, because I find that the skins of sweet potatoes are not very good. I think they're just very woody tasting and chewy. They're not like a traditional potato skin, which can crisp up nicely. So we're going to take off the skins. I just do it with my knife because I find it's pretty easy with my chef knife here. And then let's do it with our other one. And then we're going to kind of cut them in half and do a nice little like thin kind of almost looks like more like a chip than a fry, but I find that the sweet potatoes crisp up nicely that way. So get this on, and I just want to get this done and in the oven because these are going to take the most time to cook out of everything, because I want them to crisp up and not just be soft. Okay. Just getting any little thing off. Slide these to the guys to the side. Woo, almost lost my potato. And then we're going to cut it in half. And then we're going to just do little wedges, not super thin, because you do want them to have a little bit of thickness. But like if you were thinking you were making a cucumber salad, it would be about the thickness of a cucumber or like a pickle chip. So just a little bit thicker than, of course, a potato chip, but not as thick as a French fry. And that's going to really help the sweet potatoes crisp up nicely versus being kind of just like a tender, mushy thing. So we've got these nice little kind of chip size things. We're going to put them in our bowl. We'll season them up, and then we'll lay them out on our baking sheet. And we're going to do kind of a Cajun seasoning to our sweet potato fries, because I like a good savory sweet potato. I'm not a big fan of the sweet spices with the sweet potatoes. I think that tastes too much like a dessert. So we're going to do some Cajun spices with these, and I think they'll be just lovely. So one down and one more to go. And we're going to have these sweet potato or Cajun sweet potato fries. We're going to serve them with a sauteed chicken sandwich on a brioche bun with a kind of smoky Dijon mayo. And we're also going to whip up a batch of our blueberry muffins using our sourdough discard. And then we're going to make a blueberry glaze to go on top of them, just to add a little bit more blueberry flavor.
Do you have a question? How did everyone like the shrimp and grits?
I will say we were a kind of a split household. Everyone loved the grits, of course. They love the cheesy thing. But I've been trying to get my kids to eat more and more shrimp outside of the popcorn shrimp. And I will say half of them liked them. Half of them did it. And then Teddy, who is a great lover of sea creatures, didn't make the connection to them being real animals until I showed him like the exoskeleton of the shrimp that we peeled off. And then he goes, "Mama's mean." And he looked at me as if I had done something horrible. And I'm like, "Well, the shrimp weren't alive when I de-shelled them." But he couldn't eat it after that. And it was kind of so sweet. But then he played with the shells for a while. It was weird. But I will say, Torin and Lane, they all liked it. Evie, I don't think she gave it a fair shot. And Teddy was just too sad. Jack ate it up great. I loved it. My husband loved it. My parents, of course, love it. We've got our 2 sweet potatoes diced up in here. We're going to put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil on here. You really want them to kind of get a nice coating on them, because sweet potatoes are like sponges, because they'll soak up that oil. And then let me grab my flour here. We're going to put about 2 tablespoons of flour in here. This is going to give you that kind of crispy coating on it, like almost like a battered fry, like a steak fry. So we've got 1, 2 tablespoons of flour. Put this back over here for when we do our muffins. And then we're going to add in some Cajun spices. I've got about a teaspoon left, so we're just going to use the rest of this. Here we go. So, teaspoon of Cajun spices, about a half teaspoon of paprika. That's going to give it a nice, lovely color and a good savory taste to it. We're going to use about a teaspoon of onion powder. So, a good couple shakes. And then we're going to use some salt. I want to go for about a teaspoon, maybe a little less, like half a teaspoon. And we're going to give these a good coat up in that olive oil. We're making sure it gets all coated on there. So what you're going to look, it's going to look like there's kind of like a reddish paste on your sweet potatoes, but that will crisp up when we bake them in the oven. Here we go. Okay. So here is our lovely seasoned sweet potatoes. And then we're going to spread them out on our baking sheet here. And we're going to do a nice thin layer. You want to make sure none of them are on top of each other. They won't crisp up. Then they'll just be more soft. And you want that crispness to them. That was going to make them just wonderful. Here we go. And it's funny. So I just, for the longest time, I couldn't get my husband to try the sweet potato fries. And he finally tried them. And he actually really likes them. And I knew he would. You know, it just took him a while to taste it. But he did. He finally came to, and he likes them. I think he's just so used to having, I feel like sweet potato fries were done sweet for so long. So, you know, and that's just like, it's not our jam to have a sweet potato fry. You know, a lot of times they will put them with like a cinnamon sugar on it. But these are just so delicious with that Cajun spices. Sometimes I'll do like an Italian spice on them. But these are going to pair well with our chicken breast sandwiches. Okay, I almost have them all spread out in a thin layer. And the key is really make sure you have them just as much room to crisp up as possible. And I also like to do them on the actual metal pan versus putting parchment paper down because I find that they crisp up a little bit better. Yes, it's a bit more of a mess to clean, but I think they get a better crunch on them. Almost have them all out. It's like a little mosaic here. It's funny how 2 sweet potatoes can create so many little sweet potato fries. Okay, let's give my hands a quick rinse and then we'll pop these in the oven. Okay, I have these. They're going to go in at 400 because that's what my muffins are going to cook at. But if you were going to cook just the sweet potato fries by themselves, I would say 425 on either the air fryer setting or convection bake would be my preferred. But we're going to do what our muffins need since they're the most delicate. Okay, let's go whip up our blueberry sourdough muffins. We're going to start with our wet ingredients today because we don't have to cut any butter in. So we'll start with the wet. We're going to start with a half a cup of sourdough discard. And that way, after we're done, I'm going to feed it up so we can make a new batch of bread because we are almost out of the bread we baked up last night. So we're going to do a half a cup. Let me turn it so I can see my cup measuring part. So, and there we go. So half a cup of our discard. Now you can use an active starter if you have it. It's fine if you fed it and use it. We're not using it for the leavening process, more for just the way to get rid of it and the kind of little bit of that tart flavor. And then we're going to add in about 3/4 cups of sour cream. And I'm just going to eyeball the sour cream when I do this for about 3/4 cup. Need a smidge more. And I will say this is forgiving. If you put a little more or a little less, it doesn't make that much of a difference in the recipe. And we're going to pour in 1 stick of butter melted. So that's 8 tablespoons or a half a cup. And you want to let it melt and then kind of come back to room temperature. That way it doesn't like scald anything. We're going to mix this in first, give it a couple stirs, make sure that the starter and the sour cream get mixed up well together because sometimes they like to get a little clumpy, the sour cream does. And I just like to mix it smooth. Here we go. Now we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of cream. I poured in my discard one. So a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. You can use, half and half or even whole milk with it, but you might want to just use a little bit less because that's a bit more runny. And then we're going to put in our 2 eggs. So we've got 1 and 2. We're going to pop the yolks and we're going to mix the cream and the eggs into our mixture. We want to make sure we get it well mixed. This is the time where we can do our mixing. We can mix all the way up until we add the flour. Then we want to be very careful to not overmix. That way we have a very fluffy muffin versus a stiff muffin. Especially with, when you're using oil, it doesn't matter quite as much. But with butter and baked goods, if you're doing like a cake or a biscuit or something like that, over mixing can just give you a stiff product. There we go. Now we're going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla. I'm going to see if I have enough in this one or I have to go to my next one. Ooh, almost. So we want a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Okay, I'm going to pour this one in and then we just need to squeeze more of this one, but I got to take it off. So just a little squeeze more. So 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. That's going to give you a kind of a vanilla cake kind of flavor to the base of our muffins, which will pair really well with the blueberries. And now we are going to add in a teaspoon of salt. So 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So 1, 2, and then a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're going to give this a mix. Really mix those in. Once we add the baking sodas and the baking powder to this, it's going to start to get pretty fluffy because of the chemical reaction between the baking soda, baking powder, and then the acids and the sour cream and the sourdough discard. But this is going to give you that nice fluffy muffin. It will start to kind of grow in size too. Okay. We need our flour and our sugar. We're going to add in 1 cup of granulated sugar. So 1 cup of sugar. And then we're going to save a little bit. We'll have a little bit more sugar added when we sprinkle some on top right before we bake to give it a nice little bit of extra sweetness because they're not overly sweet muffins. I feel like they're just the right amount, and that little extra on top I think adds just a nice little hint of sweetness. So we've got our cup of sugar in, and now we're going to add in 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Yeah. So 1 and 2. Get this out of the way. And then now we're going to mix it, but we're going to be careful not to over mix. So you want a nice kind of lumpy, chunky batter here. So I'm just going to mix it until a majority of that flour is mixed in. Then we're going to put in our blueberries and we'll mix it up. We'll fold them in a little bit more. But the less you can mix, the fluffier these muffins are going to turn out. So just till they're barely mixed. And you don't have to worry about it. Even if you see a little bit of white powder, that is a-okay. So we've got our blueberries are mixed in, and we're going to add in, this is about a 1.5 cups of fresh blueberries. a cup and a half of fresh blueberries. Now, if you want to pat them dry, but we're going to fold these in by kind of pushing like the batter up from below and mixing it around, trying not to stir, but more of a kind of a fold. So I'm scooping up from and lifting it up on top. And that's just to get our blueberries dispersed into our batter. Here we go. Now we're ready to put these in our muffin tin. So this will make about a dozen muffins. Just slide that over here. We'll put in our liners. And I'm using foil liners because I think foil liners cook just a slightly bit better. But I don't know if there's a science behind it or not. And I think they come off the muffins a little better. Here we go. They don't want to come apart today. So we're going to put in we've got our 12 liners in here, and then we're going to fill up our muffin tins to the very top. No 3/4 full. I like mine overflowing. It's going to give a big bakery dome. And this batter is thicker than an oil-based batter, but once it heats up, it will melt down and actually take up less room than what we have it at. Ooh, those blueberries were flying here. Let's add those in here. So we're going to go through, we're going to add a big scoop to each one, and then we'll come back and even it out and add a little bit more. But it makes about a dozen pretty good sized overflow things. Now, if you wanted to do slightly smaller muffins, you could probably stretch it to 18 by filling them a little bit less. But you're not going to get that good bakery dome on them if you fill them lower. And that's the best part about a muffin is that the muffin top. So much flavor. So we're going to go through, we'll fill them all up, and then we'll come back in. But because, this is a butter-based batter, it is much thicker and denser than if you were to use an oil. And you can substitute them out, one for one. But I find that butter just has a better flavor and texture in baked goods. Okay. We'll go through, and then we're going to fill up the tops with any extra that we have. Now, if you're going to leave any slightly less, your middle two ones get the least amount of heat out of all of your muffins. So if you fill them slightly less, then they will cook at about the exact same time as your other muffins, just because they are kind of surrounded by other muffins that steal a little bit more of the heat. Okay. Now I'm going to go through and top off the rest of my little muffin things. And don't worry that they're big and doming out. It won't run over the edges at all. That is how these are made. Making sure I get all of the blueberries. Don't want any of that to go to waste. A few more scoops. And then we can brush them with cream, pop them in the oven, and bake them up.
You have a question? Do you upload the videos or the recipes?
I do upload the videos to these on our link on our page. So you should always be able to recreate the recipes at home from the videos. And occasionally we have recipe cards out for everyone. Most of the time they go to our people and part of our membership. But this recipe card might actually be up from a while ago. But if the best way is always the link, you can rewatch the video because I try to go through all of them on there. And it takes us about an hour or so to get them up. Okay, let's brush these with a little bit of cream. Let's use up. I've been trying to use up. I had about like a tablespoon in this one, and I've been waiting. Like, I need to take it out to use it. And then we're going to give just a little dab over this. And this cream is going to give our muffins a nice kind of golden brown top to them. Otherwise, the muffins would be pretty blonde in their appearance. So it just makes them have a nice golden brown color, which is always a bit more pleasing, even though the flavor would be the same. It gives you that golden brown without having to over bake them. I know a lot of people will bake them without doing like a cream brushing on it, and then they bake them until they're golden brown, but then they've over baked them. And now we're going to sprinkle a little bit of sugar on. You don't need much. We're not even going to use this whole tablespoon probably for this. But this just adds a nice little sweetness to the top, which I think makes the muffin dome even tastier. Okay, let's go pop these in the oven. I have it preheated to 400 degrees.
You have a question. When you make sourdough bread, do you use unbleached flour or regular all-purpose?
I used unbleached bread flour. Bread flour has a bit more gluten in it, which helps with the elasticity and the crumb of the bread. And then unbleached because sourdough needs that unbleached because of the bleaching process kills the good bacteria that is needed for the rising. We're going to put these on top because they bake better and they'll have more direct heat. I'm going to set my timer for 18 minutes. And those should be nice and ready.
You have a question? Where do you get your containers?
Amazon. So I actually get most of my containers from Amazon, but these are all from Amazon. I actually added them to my Amazon storefront. So I just got approved for a storefront and I made them in the list. I think they're under kitchen utensils or whatnot, but I have the ones that I have on there in our storefront. I think the link is on our page, will be on our video or whatnot. But it is a great place to go find all of them, but they are, it's there. I have them on there. They're actually really reasonably priced, and they have had them for 3-4 years now, and I love them. They're great for like getting rid of like pantry moths and keeping your food fresh. So I really, really like them. With the Amazon, I do make a small like commission if anyone buys anything off of there, but it's just a great way for me to kind of show you what I have without having to like message everybody or whatnot. So you can check them out there. But I do also have like all of the other little kitchen stuff because it's so nice because you can just go to your shopping history and I can just add it to a list because people always are asking me like, oh, where'd you get this? Where'd you get that? Okay, I'm going to fillet my chickens here, my chicken breasts here in half because these are pretty thick. And then I'm going to try to we're going to cut them into kind of each one into eighths. So this right here is just not going to be a great part of the chicken. You see how it has so much fat in it. So don't feel like you're wasting, but just cut it off. You're not going to want it on your end product. I remember when I first started like cooking, I always felt bad trimming stuff off my meats because I was like, oh, that's so wasteful. But it's not because you're not going to end up eating it. You're going to chew it. It's not going to be good. So I always just trim those bits off because it's only going to make a rubbery texture and it's going to detract from your overall meal. Okay. We're going to cut kind of each one. I'm trying to make 8 little sandwiches here for our lunch today. Okay, let me get my hand, well, before I wash my hand up. I always try to keep one hand clean so that you can always move around. I'm going to hammer some of these just a little bit thinner so they'll cook up evenly. And I'm going to hammer some of these just a little bit thinner so they'll cook up evenly. And we're not going to put seasoning on them. We'll keep them lovely. Okay. And you just want to make sure they're all about the same size. That way these will cook up evenly. Give my hands a quick little rinse here. Let me grab a pair of tongs. That way we can flip and season them. Okay, so normally I would use Worcestershire sauce, but I'm out of it. I need to order some. some A1 is very similar to it. It's also a vinegar-based sauce. It has slightly more smokehouse flavor. So that's why I was like, oh, we'll do a smokehouse flavor with the chicken today. It'll go well. So we're going to drizzle some of our A1 over it. This has, if you've never used A1 before, it's a vinegar and tomato puree base, but it's really good for breaking down the natural fats in the meats that will give it a lot of just great flavors. Here, I'm going to put my chicken or my sweet potato scraps to the side. And then we're going to sprinkle with some Montreal steak spices here. So we're going to give it a nice little sprinkle over. And this has a little bit of salt in it as well, so we don't need to really add much, but this is going to give it a nice kind of steakhouse flavor to it, which pairs really well with today's meal. There we go. And then where is my liquid smoke? If you've never used liquid smoke, it is just a smoky flavored liquid that just feels like it's been in the smokehouse, like a smoker, but without much. We're just going to add a little bit onto each one. And this is going to add a lot of flavor. We're only going to do it on one side because this does have a lot of flavor to it. And so you don't need a whole lot. We're going to do a nice little sprinkle over of onion powder. Give it a little bit more savory flavor. And then we're going to flip it over. And I'm just going to flip each one over. And then we're going to sprinkle some more spices on the other side. But I can even smell like the smoky flavor from the smokehouse or like the liquid smoke. It just adds a nice flavor. A little bit more A1 to this on this side. We'll just do a nice little drizzle over the top.
I get a question. How long do you cook chicken?
It varies depending on what cut of chicken you're using and how thick it is. These will only need to be cooked about like 3 or so minutes on each side because we cut them, we butterflied them, hammered them down. They're fairly thin, and we're going to use a nice hot skillet. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt, an extra salt on this side, and then some onion powder, and then we're going to heat up our skillet and get ready to fry these up. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my skillet here to about an 8 to heat up the oil because we want to use a nice hot skillet for our chicken. And I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of oil in here because we want our chicken to saute a bit, but it doesn't need to be drenching in it. There we go. And then I'm going to bring this over here, and we're going to cut up our veggies over here. That way we have a little bit of space. So I've got tomatoes, some red onion, and we're going to use a brioche bun for our sandwiches. So I'm just going to get them all prepped up over here and ready. Not everyone loves tomatoes on it, so this will only be for some of my family. And I'm just going to cut some really thin slices. This will go on top of our sandwiches when we make them. Same with the red onion and the avocado. We're going to use pepper jack cheese. That is just going to go well with the kind of spicy smokehouse flavors. Here we go. So I've got our tomatoes nice and thin. We're going to cut up our red onion. I always say red onions are really only good for eating raw. When you cook them up, they lose their flavor really quick because they're pretty mild. So I always have red onions on hand, but one red onion will last me forever. So we're just going to do some nice thin slices here. That way we'll be ready to decorate our sandwich. And then I've got an avocado. I'm hoping it is still fresh, pretty fresh. Good. So we're just going to give it a nice peel off so I can slice it thin. When they're ripe, you should be able to just peel this outer layer off. No problem. That part was a little bruised. And we should have some nice thin avocado slices that we can then add onto our sandwich. Pop out the seed. But you see how it just separates off, right? That's when you know it's ripe. If it's underripe, your skin won't come off nicely. You can also slide a spoon underneath it if you want to, but I find it pops out fairly easy. There we go. And you've got your pretty avocados. Add it in here. This can be my little trash thing right over here. Okay. Let me wash my hands real quick. I think our chicken oil should be nice and hot now. I'm going to turn it down to about a 6. You don't want it super hot. That way it burns it. We're going to add in, we're going to do 4 fillets at a time so it doesn't overcrowd them. There we go. We're going to let these saute up nicely. I'm going to grab my buns out, at least my first pack. We got a second pack, but that way I'll be ready to assemble when it's time. Slide that right there. Let's go make our kind of smoky aioli that we're going to put on our thing. And a spoon. Okay. We're going to do a little bit of a smoky Dijon mayo. So we're going to use some real mayo. We're going to do about 2 tablespoons here. This is going to give it a nice kind of creamy flavor. You grab another. I'm going to grab a tong and a plate ready for when we're ready for that. I will say you can smell the A1 in there. It smells really nice. We're going to use about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. You want to use this over the yellow one because it has a bit more mustardy flavor. It's slightly more mellow, I will say. And then we're going to use a little bit of our liquid smoke. This is going to give it a nice smoky flavor to it. A little goes a long way, so don't use too much. Actually, I'm just going to do it in my cap here. You need like a half a teaspoon because that is going to make it just a lovely flavor. We're going to use a little bit of onion powder. And then a little bit of our Montreal steak seasoning. Give it a little bit of a kick. So about, I want to say, we're going to go for about a half a teaspoon of this. And we're going to mix it up. And this will just be a great kind of mustardy mayo base to go on our sandwich to kind of wet up the bun. But I think it just plays nicely. Has a great little flavor. I'm going to add this over here so we'll be ready to assemble. And check this over here so we'll be ready to assemble. And check out our and then when we're transferring, we'll be ready for that. Look at this nice kind of crispy edges on it. While that is crisping up, let's work on the glaze for our blueberry muffins. I need powdered sugar, blueberry powder, and I've got some things. We're going to use a little bit of cream to kind of give it a rich texture to it. So we've got about 2 tablespoons of cream. So 1, 2. We're going to use a splash of vanilla, like a half a teaspoon if even, just a small amount. There we go. That's going to give it kind of a vanilla-y undertones. And then I have this thing, it's called blueberry powder. It's just freeze-dried blueberries, but it adds a nice flavor and a pop of color, which I think is always fun. So we're going to put in about a good tablespoon or so in here. We're going to mix this up, and then we'll add in our powdered sugar. But this is going to give it such a pretty color that will just be so pretty. We want to dissolve those blueberries in here first, or this freeze-dried powder in here first, before we mix in the powdered sugar. Otherwise, you'll get more of a clump. And this will give it a very mellow blueberry flavor, but it's going to be lovely. There we go. You can see how it even like thickened up really well. Look at that. And now we're going to add in our powdered sugar, and we might add a little bit more cream depending on, we want to get it to the consistency of about like glue kind of running. So we're going to start with just like half a cup of powdered sugar. The powdered sugar will actually probably make it a little bit more runny because it will start to dissolve in here. There we go. There we go. Look at that nice rich blue color we're getting with our glaze. And look, we've got a nice ooze to it. And I like to mix things. You could do it with a whisk, but I find a fork works a little bit better than a spoon because it really helps you kind of break up some of those. But look at this nice ooze. That will be perfect for glazing our muffins. This is about the consistency that you want. You see how it's a slow, it's not just running off. It's got a nice thickness, but it's not runny. Perfect. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left on those. I think our chicken here is just about done. Look at this nice kind of golden brown sears on it. Beautiful. Okay, this is the kind of the consistency. And then one way to know with your chicken is if you touch it down with your spatula. If it feels firm, then you know that it's cooked through. If your chicken squishes, has a lot of give, that is a big indication that it is not cooked all the way through. But again, we did butterfly these and hammered them out, so they're going to cook pretty fast. There we go. So we've got our chicken, our first batch in. Let's get our second one. And we're cooking these on about between a 6.5, 7, so fairly high temperature. But that's why it's really important to make sure they're thinner versus thick. If we were doing a thicker cut, you would turn down the temperature to a 5, about halfway, and then cook them a little bit longer and a little bit slower. Get this out of the way. Wipe up some of my little herbs here. And while we're waiting, get that right there. We're going to cut up our melon. I've got a big honeydew I've been waiting to cut up. Let me wash my big chef knife over here so it doesn't have any avocado on it. There we go. So we've got a little honeydew here. We're going to cut it out. We're going to scrape out the seeds in the middle. These seeds, unlike a pumpkin or whatnot, these seeds are not good for eating. We're going to give them a good scrape out. I'll scrape both and then we'll dump them. Here. I love honeydew is a great thing. And I will say, if you eat a lot of melons, pineapple, fruits that need to be cut them up yourself and then they'll be much cheaper. Let me dump the seeds out And then we're gonna go get our muffins out of the oven. Okay. Turn that down a smidge. Be ready for our muffins. We can check on our potatoes. I'm gonna grab a trivet to have. A look at those gorgeous blueberry muffins. They are popping. You can see the blueberries busting out. And our sweet potato fries are doing awesome. I'm going to move them up to the top shelf right here and let them crisp up just a smidge longer. But these are looking gorgeous. You see the domes on these? This is what you get from when you fill them up to the top. You get this just gorgeous blueberry dome, muffin dome that has all the flavor. And then we're going to come over with our blueberry glaze while they're still hot. And this is going to allow the glaze to really run down them and add so much flavor. Another pop of color, but it's going to be just so delicious. The mild blueberry flavor in the glaze from the like dehydrated, like freeze-dried blueberries will add just a very mellow hint plus the vanilla. So it just adds a little pop of sweetness to the muffins that are just like the perfect about. And then we did, of course, use our sourdough discard in here. So they're nice and gut healthy as well. They're so soft and fluffy. This is why you don't want to over mix them. You know how I said make sure you don't over mix them. When you over mix them, they won't rise as much and they won't be as fluffy. But these are beautiful. Okay, let's finish up our lunch here. Look at this nice sear on our chicken. Beautiful. We got all of those little crispy edges. Let's cut up our honeydew real quick and we will be ready to serve up lunch. So with my honeydew, I always start and I make it into slices. Then I'm going to cut it down. And look, when you cut it, your melon will now lay flat, which will allow you to just slide your knife underneath it. And you're going to get the most out of it without wasting hardly any. Look how close to the rind you get. Pretty darn close. This is going to save you, I will say, at least $5 a melon, if not more, by just cutting it up yourself. You're going to get way more for the cost, and it stays fresher than what, you don't know when they cut it up in the store, if it's the same day, 2 days before, or whatnot. Pineapple is a huge savings because pineapple, you can get a pineapple for like $3. But you want it cut up at the store, that's going to be close to $10. So try it. You'll be surprised how easy it is and how little work it takes. I can cut this whole honeydew melon up in less than 5 minutes. So if I think about it and think economically, 5 minutes of me spending here saves me $5. And we're a large family, so we go through a lot of melon. And you just, pretty easy to go through. I will say this method works well with cantaloupe and honeydew, crimshaw melons. With watermelon, the rind is tougher, so it won't fold flat. But that way, you just kind of cut gently along the edges and swirl. So it's not too difficult with a watermelon either. Just like this. Take your blade, slide it under, and voila. And I will say this honeydew looks like it is perfect for eating. It's got a nice firmness to it while still being soft but not mushy. And you can see the nice vibrant green. You can tell that it's going to be really sweet. There we go. Slide this under. One last go, and then we should be able to serve up because that chicken looks like it's going to be done in just a second. We'll grab those sweet potato fries out of the oven and we will serve up. Okay, look at this mountain of honeydew melon in no time at all. Okay, look at these. Look at this nice crispy sear on it. Perfect. Beautiful. I'll turn this off. Let's go grab our sweet potato fries out of the oven, and then we will plate up. So I always say the sweet potato fries needs the longest, which is why we put them in there. Now, if you cook them at a slightly higher temperature, you won't need them as long, but you see how we've got this nice golden crispy edges on them. The brown coloring on it, that's from our Cajun spices that we used in the paprika. It's going to give them a nice rich golden brown color. Let me grab a spatula here. I'm going to slide them under. You see how they kind of just slide up here? And then you flip them over and you see how they have that nice crispy edge on them, but they're still soft but crunchy. Perfect for it. Let's get this dinner or lunch served up. So here is how we're going to serve them up today. We've got our serving of sweet potato fries with that Cajun spices on it. Then we're going to take our brioche bun. We're going to add our smokehouse mayo to it. I'm going to put a little on the top. This had Dijon mustard, some smoke flavor to it, and all that jazz. We're going to add in our chicken breast on top of that. We've got some tomatoes, some red onions, a little bit of avocado over the top, and I'm going to set it down right over here. And then we're going to add our pepper jack cheese for a little extra kick. You could also use Havarti or Munster or any of those. That we'll add it on. There's our things. And then we're going to have a nice serving of our fruit to put on here. So here is our honeydew melon to go on. And then, of course, last but definitely not least, let it come up. Look at this beautiful blueberry muffin with the blueberry glaze. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we cooked for, and rewatch the videos at home. We also have an Amazon storefront, so if I've talked about some of the different utensils or baking stuff that I've used here, I have them all listed in my Amazon storefront, so you can always go to that link and check it out. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and